Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we are talking about clefs. Why are we talking about clefs and not note names yet? Gloves, dude, man, bro, potato chip. What's the deal, bro? Well, before we could talk about where notes fall, like what note that is, it's determined by the clef, because we need some sort of symbol, and I guess maybe you didn't know this, we need a symbol to tell us what these different lines mean. Why is that? Why would we do that? Why would you do this to us, music? And it's because we have these things called ledger lines. So if we're going to use a pitch with as large a range as we have, we're going to either need more lines, like we do right here, to extend it up or down. And if we were to play the full range of like the keyboard, which is 88 keys, you're going to need a freaking huge amount of ledger lines. Like it will just not be reasonable to try and read something like that, and that's exactly the opposite of what we want. So we have different clefs to determine different ranges, and I'm going to speak to things very broadly right now. I might get a little specific every now and then, but because I haven't covered note names or anything, because you need to understand clef first. So the clef defines this for us. There are 4 main clefs, but there are a ton of weird variations. So we're going to talk about them, and there's one that's actually not here. This is just one example. There's tablature, which I guess you could consider a clef. We'll just say tab here, which we're not going to talk about. And then there's 2 bars, which means that these lines do not correspond to notes. They correspond to percussion, and different where you put your notes on there will just like symbolize whether or not you're hitting a hi-hat or a ride and stuff like that. We're not going to deal with that too much. We're going to be focusing on harmony. I'm not even sure I'm going to deal with it at all. So okay, let's start out with this one. This is the one every musician, almost everyone, unless you're playing like the viola. Man, viola. What the heck was that? They use this clef occasionally, but I believe they can also switch clefs. I don't play that instrument, so I don't know. If you learned an instrument, some of these clefs seem like total foreign, like gook. Like, why would you ever use this? But it's much more intuitive for the instrument and for the writing style. Honestly, if the entire world decided to redesign this, I bet we could come up with like a way better, this makes so much more sense system. But this has been around for so long that it's just never going to happen. Until you die and get to heaven, unless you're an atheist, then wherever you go. And yeah, I'm not sure what kind of music system exists there, so maybe you'll find luck there. So we have a G clef. So this is a treble clef. It circles around wherever this little circle comes around. You notice it looks like a G. This is a G. Now the question comes, okay, so if I put my note right here, that's a G. And the answer is yes. That is a G. How great is that? Very simple. We're going to stop right there with the clefs. We just want to understand what the clef guides us to. Now, it's actually a specific G. The number escapes me. I believe it's a G4. Which we haven't talked about yet either. I'm not even sure if I'm going to talk about it in this series. Probably will. It's not super necessary. But this is essentially an octave higher. Technically, it's a major 10th higher than this guy. So if we wanted to write like really low notes, we wanted to go down an octave. Well, an octave that was weird. There's 12 tones, but an octave's 8 steps. It's weird. So if we go down to a lower G, this is just a lower G. One day you're going to just have to memorize these. But let's say we want to go down again to another G. I believe that's another G. So as you can see, if you have a bunch of notes down here, that's like no one going to read that. So in order to solve this, we have something called the bass clef, which that same G. So there's the G just below. That's G. That's the same G with all those lines. Now it's in our nice staff. Much easier to see it and tell what it is. Oh, it's the last line. So it's a lot easier to sort of do this because we have these reference last line or top line, bottom line, and then these middle lines. So we have this, it's easier to read this instead of adding a bunch of lines. This is what we do. And as you can see, if we want to extend this, we can using just more they're called ledger lines, these little extra lines. So yeah, so the bass clef, this is called the F clef, and as I just said, it's technically a major 10th. So when I was learning to read this, I played flute, and I played everything in the treble clef because flute's a higher toned instrument. So naturally the notes they're going to play are going to be higher up. No one's going to write down the notes low because that would be like really misleading to the tone of the flute. So I would learn to read things like this, and we're going to talk about the notes in the coming videos. But this is an A because here's G. Well, I haven't talked about this yet, but anyways, this is an A. Just trust me on this. This is an A. It's actually a really low note for the flute too. Like, I don't even believe the flute could play. I believe it could play down to an E. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I played the flute. But these are super mega low notes. They have lower flutes for things like this though. So anyways, this is the G clef. Circles around the G. And if we go to the G, let's just go to the G. That's the easiest. So we know this is G, right? That's G. Well, if we go to the bass clef, here's the G. Let me go to the G on the bass clef. That's the G on the bass clef. You'll notice that this is the G on the treble clef. And so I used to always just read treble clef and then transpose down. Transpose means to move a specific amount of distance. I would transpose down a third, and that sounds way more complicated than it actually is. What I would do is I'd go, oh, well, in the treble clef, if I move this note up 2 spaces, it's a G, because I had all those ones memorized. So I had this sort of system in my head, and then I learned piano, and I had to learn bass clef. So, and you're gonna need to learn all of this. But anyways, the bass clef, so it's lower tones. It circles around the F. You see these 2 dots? I have no idea why they look the way they do. I've never looked this up, but these 2 dots represent where F is. And can you move this up and down? Yes, you can. You can move the dots up and down. Well, not the dots, the whole clef. But I have never, ever, ever seen that before. Ever. So don't do it. I don't know why you do it, but don't do it. Now, so that's that. So you can move the F around. So this, that's an F. If the dots circled around, say, that note, then that would be an F instead. But instead, that's a G. And we'll talk about that next time. So, okay, that's really interesting. So this is our clef gives us an anchor point to derive all the other notes. That's weird. I saw a spot on my hand. So, okay, that's really interesting. What about this last guy? This is called the tenor clef. He's a little more unusual. Almost most instruments use these 2. Piano uses a combination of the bass and the treble called the grand staff, which we will talk about. So here we've got a tenor clef. Looks like this. Wherever this line is, wherever the middle of this thing is, that is C. So this is a C. I know. It's like you just got to remember these things. They're easier for musicians. This is like viola. Jeez, I don't know what the deal is today with me and that instrument. So anyways, they use this. There are reasons it's easier harmonically for them to think about certain things this way because of the way the strings on their instrument are. And whoa, I just did that. It should be like that. So yeah, so this is C. I very rarely use this unless I'm writing for strings. And even then, you can write in a clef you're more familiar with and then just transpose it later and go through and fix notation errors, which we could talk about later. Now, this one is one that shifts around. So it'll shift around like that sometimes, and this is now C. You can see it even switched. If I bring it back, it goes back down. So it's just weird. So I think everything sort of relative to treble clef or bass clef. That's the way I think about things because I'm a piano player, and you should learn piano. Like, you just should do that. Like, here's a piano down here. And we're going to start getting into this a little bit more. So that's clefs. That's clefs for you. If you have any questions, let me know. Now, you will occasionally see a little 8 down here or at the top. This simply means move it down an octave or up an octave. And I have seen that, but it's very rare. It's way less rare though than moving the actual clef up and down. I'm sure in old music it's like that, but no one in their right mind today does that because that's just no one's gonna want to play your music. You're gonna be out of a job. So don't do that. Or they'll just change it if your music is like amazing. So yeah, if you have any questions again, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.